Welcome into the PFN Bengals podcast. I am Dallas Robinson. He is Jay Morrison. Jay, the Bengals season is over, but NFL football continues and NFL football business continues. We've got a lot to talk about today on the show. We've got some interview requests for Bengals employees. We've got some Hall of Fame talk. We're going to do a free agency, Bengals free agent draft for you later. We'll get into the details of that in a little bit, but that's kind of how we're going to finish the end of the show. But Jay, let's get into the little bit of the news before we get into that. Brian Callahan, offensive coordinator for the Bengals, is getting interview requests from around the league. He's already met with a couple of teams. Trey Brown is getting interest from around the league, the senior personnel executive for the Bengals, who's up for some GM jobs around the NFL. Bengals coaches and decision makers are kind of in demand here as hiring cycle gets underway.
Yeah, it's really unique because the job that the Bengals front office, the scouts have done is so impressive because of how limited they are, with how small that department is, and they just never leave. And I'm sure they get interest, so it's kind of unique to hear. And there was some interest in Trey Brown last year too, and so now Patriots. He's worked for a bunch of different organizations, so he's been here for 3 years. Great guy, not just a scout, does a lot in that personnel department. I think he's got a really bright future. Whether any of these interviews, Raiders or Patriots, pan out, we'll see. But it's all part of the step where, so not everybody nails that first interview, or even if you nail the interview, you don't get that first job, and it's just all part of the practice and training. And so it'd be interesting to see how that goes for him. Brian, you look and the season didn't go the way you wanted, but we talked about it on earlier pod. The job they did with Jake Browning is just incredible. And that's what has teams interested in him. If you look at, Chargers are set with Herbert, and that's who he's interviewing with today on Tuesday as we record this. But, the Titans are looking for someone to take Will Levis to the next step. And Falcons have Desmond Ridder or maybe a new quarterback. And then the Panthers have Bryce Young, who they're looking for someone that can come in and kind of mold him and be much better than he was in his rookie year. So Brian's another guy. I know he's going to nail the interviews. 4 of them. He had 2 last year. I don't know how many interviews he had, but he spoke with 2 teams last year. As the Colts and the Cardinals didn't get either one, so doubles that this year. We'll see if he gets them. Hope for him that is the case. It'll be an incredible run if he doesn't, because we've already talked about how odd it is that the continuity this past year, 5 straight years, same coach and all 3 coordinators, probably running it back again this year. It's amazing to think that could be the case with a team that's having success, not losing coordinators. But I'm hopeful for those guys. But personally, you like having them around. They're great resources. So we'll see where this goes. I don't know how soon teams are going to actually start pulling the trigger on some of these hirings. You've got in-person interviews that are still yet to happen. It's all virtual right now, and I'm sure they're going to want to sit the guys that advance to like the next step of each interview process. They're going to want to sit down with them in person and do it face to face. So still ways to go, but I think Brian's got a good chance to land one of those.
Yeah, I think he does too. You look at the 4 jobs that he's met with. I think, Atlanta met with Bill Belichick yesterday and put that news out yesterday. I think he's probably a good candidate to land there. It seems like all the tea leaves have pushed Bill Belichick to Atlanta. So I don't know if Brian Callahan has a chance there. Maybe a similar thing with the Chargers, where it seems like everything is sending Harbaugh to Los Angeles. Yeah. But that still leaves the Titans and the Panthers as 2 jobs that Callahan's meeting with, where I think he would have a good chance. The Panthers have been tied to Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, dating back to last year. They wanted to hire him. He declined to leave Detroit. He's reportedly their number 1 candidate, but he's also the number 1 candidate for the Washington Commanders, who I think would be a much more enticing job, just looking at what they have from a salary cap perspective and draft capital. There could be jobs open for Brian Callahan, I think, and what the cascading effect that would be for the Bengals, I think is pretty obvious, is that Dan Pitcher, the quarterback's coach, would most likely be elevated to offensive coordinator. But you also have to think, okay, could Dan Pitcher get interest from around the league? Because this is kind of a dual process here that, sure, Callahan could get a head coaching job, but Pitcher could he go with Callahan somewhere? Could he stay and be the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati? Could he go somewhere else and take on play calling duties that he's not going to have in Cincinnati regardless of what happens? There's a lot going on, I think, with kind of the offensive coaching structure. for the Bengals. And then Trey Brown, he interviewed in 2022 with the Raiders as well before the Raiders hired the Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler kind of conglomerate that did not work out. So Mark Davis, the Raiders owner, I think clearly liked what he heard from Trey Brown last time, or else he wouldn't have had him come back. And like you mentioned, Trey Brown has interviewed for other vacancies in the past. He's been featured in a Microsoft Surface commercial that's played endlessly. So he's got screen and FaceTime with NFL teams for the past few years. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if either one of these guys kind of gets a promotion and kind of gets to run their own team moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you think too, we don't know what's going to happen, but could still be a change in Dallas. And then maybe Belichick goes there instead of Atlanta.
Or Philadelphia.
Or Philadelphia, too. That was the
Yeah.
disaster last night. And they've done it before. They've pulled the trigger and blown things up 2 years after a Super Bowl run in the past. So it's not out of the question. That looked so bad last night. I mean, it's one thing to lose, but the effort didn't look there. The scheme, they just looked a mess.
Horrible tackling, explosive plays. Looked like the Bengals defense for a little bit.
It looked worse than the Bengals defense, honestly. It did.
It did. They need a complete defensive overhaul, staff, players, everything. I think so. The hiring cycle is in full swing, and are you surprised that Lou and Arumo didn't get any interviews? Not a single request. I guess I'm not, just based on how the Bengals defense played this year. We've talked about it before. How could an ownership group say, "Hey, we're going to hire the Bengals defensive coordinator who just had the 30th ranked defense or whatever"? It's a hard sell. Obviously, he got interest in the past, and teams like his personality. They like what he's done in previous years with schemes and developing younger players. His age works against him. The Bengals defensive performance this year works against him. I mean, are you surprised at all that he didn't even get a single call?
No, I'm not. And because, if teams are hiring coaches, they're probably in a situation where they're going to be young on that side of the ball, and they're going to need to see that come together quickly. And just that's what knocked the Bengals. That's what took the Bengals down this year. The young secondary, and could never get it together. So I think that is a knock on him. And you hear people talking all the time about what a hard sell Dan Quinn is going to be after that performance against the Packers. And he was fantastic all year. You're talking about one bad game. And people are like, "Ooh, how do you sell that to your fan base?" And so we'll see. I think he's still the leading candidate in Seattle to get that job. But I'm not surprised. That's just, Lou was kind of fighting an uphill battle anyhow with his age, and then being a defensive guy. It's just kind of going against the trend. And then the season they had this year, I don't want to say it's never going to happen for him, but I'm not surprised that he's not getting the run this year that he did last year.
The other news that we've got from Bengals land this week is Hall of Fame vote coming up for Willie Anderson. He is in his 11th year of eligibility. This is his third time as a finalist. So the vote will take place this week, but it's not going to be announced for another 2 or 3 weeks right before the Super Bowl. Willie is the only offensive tackle among this 15-person class. He is the one of 2 offensive linemen, along with former New Orleans Saint Jyree Evans. What's this process look like, Jay? And I mean, what do you think his chances are? Is this going to be the year that Willie Anderson gets in?
That's a good question. I hope so. The process is, so all the Hall of Fame voters are going to have a Zoom this week. Jeff Hobson from Bengals.com will present Willie's case, and he's done a fantastic job of this. And you look, Julius Peppers, who's probably going to go in this year, never had a sack against Willie. A lot of these Hall of Famers that are already in, edge guys, never had a sack against Willie. So that's working in his favor. The fact that, like you said, he's the only tackle. Now, Kari Evans is on as another offensive lineman. He was a guard, though. So it seems like this is, I don't want to say his last best shot, but it's definitely his best shot so far for Willie. And, it goes back to even what former Bengals O-line coach Paul Alexander did, where he worked with Pro Football Focus, because they only graded guys so far, and they went back and did Willie's entire career and watched every game and did the grades. And it's hard. It's hard to come up with tangible support for offensive linemen in terms of data. And that was a big thing. I think that was maybe one of the biggest reasons he has jumped now into being a semifinalist and a finalist. And we're seeing him get more run. So they'll vote this week. They'll know this week. I think it might be Wednesday that they do it. But it used to be they would get together in the city of the Super Bowl and they would do this vote on Saturday and they would announce it Saturday night. But now it's all they are terrific videos. If anyone's seen it, where the director of the Hall of Fame shows up and knocks on the door. I'm sure it's a little staged because it's like, what happens if they're not
Mhm.
home? You
Yeah,
gotta you
right.
gotta have somehow figure out a way to make them be at home without being suspicious of. But just the emotions that come pouring out of these guys, you see it in their speeches, but just that confirmation before it's all set in, where it
Mhm.
finally happens. It is terrific television, and so it makes sense that they want to do this. They'll have 3 weeks to go to each of these guys' houses and let them know that they're in. Usually, each Hall of Fame class is about five, so
Mhm.
it feels it'll be in that range. So I'm hopeful for Willie. He's a terrific
Yeah.
guy, terrific ambassador for the Bengals. And like you said, with not there being a lot of O linemen on the finalist list, a great shot for him to finally get in.
Yeah, and talking about kind of that lack of data points for offensive linemen too. I mean, you can look at something like Pro Football Reference has their Hall of Fame score or Hall of Fame meter that kind of tries to put a number on it, but it's tough even with linemen because so much of those data points are based on who made a Pro Bowl, who made an All Pro, and giving certain scores and points for that stuff. When Willie was playing, there, like you said, there was no Pro Football Focus. How many people were really analyzing
Mhm.
offensive tackle tape on a snap by snap basis and truly knew who were the elite players of the position back then? It was a different time. It was certainly not the kind of data oriented NFL universe we live in now. So from that perspective, I think it's great that they went back and kind of looked at Willie's seasons and saw, man, this guy truly was one of the best offensive tackles of his generation. And like you said, add in the personality that I think every Bengals fan loves, and clearly we all want to see this guy get in the Hall of Fame. So good luck to Willie. We'll see. We'll see if that happens this week. Last bit of news before we get into our free agent draft, Jay, the wild card round. We had football this weekend. We had two AFC North teams play and lose. Steelers lost to the Bills. Browns were absolutely dominated by the Texans. Uh, not a great weekend. It was a fun weekend because football is always fun, but man, tons of lopsided scores and big blowouts, and not exactly this kind of tight, close, drama filled wild card weekend that we might have been hoping for.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think with the Buffalo game getting moved to Monday, a
Mhm.
lot of people are like, "Yeah, I love this. Let's do two every day instead of the 2-3-1 format."
Yeah.
I don't think the league will ever go for that because even though it's a Martin Luther King Day is a bank holiday,
Yeah.
you're still talking about a lot of people working. That game starts at 4:30 on the West Coast. It's 1:30.
It
It's
felt like it was 3:30 here in the Central Time Zone. It
yeah,
felt like it was the COVID season or something. It
yeah,
just felt so weird watching football on a Monday afternoon, but yeah.
yeah. So I don't know that they'll do that, but it was fun.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question of you. So you look and you're like, oh, the Bengals are the poor little runts of the AFC North. They're the only ones that didn't make the playoffs, and now you see Pittsburgh. What happened to them in Buffalo, and then Cleveland getting their doors blown off by Houston. If you're buying stock in AFC North teams, let's just look at a 3-year window.
Mhm.
I mean, where are you starting? Is
It
it Bengals last, or does that change your mind of what you saw
Oh, no.
this weekend about where would you put the Bengals in the pecking order in a 3-year window in the division?
No, I would solidly put them in the top 2,
Yeah.
because it's either them or the Ravens. You look at the Browns, I mean, they're absolutely hamstrung by the Deshaun Watson
Mhm.
contract. It's fully guaranteed. There's no escaping this deal. No one's gonna trade for Deshaun Watson. I mean, he might be cooked. He might absolutely be done as a
Yeah.
quarterback, and there's no way to get out of that deal. I would not want to be in their position. And the Steelers, I don't think have a quarterback answer at all, unless, do you think they're going to start Kenny Pickett next year after basically benching him
Yeah.
for Mason Rudolph? Are they going to go into next year with Mason Rudolph as their starter? So to me, it's easily Bengals and Ravens, I think, moving forward. Between those two, it's very tough because the Ravens, you know, talent top to bottom. But they could lose both of their coordinators this offseason and maybe
Mhm.
have to restructure how they're doing things. But I think there's a clear top two and a clear bottom two over these next
Yeah.
few years in the AFC North.
And it's, I know Bengals fans, really all football fans love the Schadenfreude,
Yes.
experience of rooting against the teams in your division. And I think everybody, even outside the division, is kind of laughing at the Browns situation right now because, the team that they got Deshaun Watson from is loaded with draft picks now because of this trade and just
Yeah.
far and above or far and ahead where they are in terms with CJ Stroud's play versus Deshaun Watson's play. And then the quarterback they gave up on, Baker Mayfield, wins a
Right.
playoff game last night. I mean, this is just bad weekend for the Cleveland Browns.
It's really bad. And like, do you bring Joe Flacco back next year? Do you
Yeah,
say you have to start Deshaun Watson, right? I mean, you
right.
can't not start Deshaun Watson. Do you bring Flacco back? Is that awkward? Does the rest of the team want Flacco as the starter? It's not a situation I'd want to be in for sure. It's my question for you, Jay, is how do you think the Bengals could have competed this weekend if they'd snuck in as the sixth or seventh seed? Do you think they could have made some noise like in this tournament? I mean, we saw some really disappointing performances from some of these AFC teams. I know the Bengals like obviously had their issues. They would have been with a backup quarterback. Any chance you think the Bengals could have made any noise this weekend or through these playoffs had they snuck in?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, if they were the 7, they would go on to Buffalo, a team they already
Yeah.
beat this year. Um, So yeah, they wouldn't have had Joe Burrow, but I think they could have been competitive in that game more so than the Steelers were. And then if they were the 6 somehow, they would have gone to Kansas City, and they had just done that.
Yeah.
And yeah, they lost, but you wouldn't say that wasn't a competitive game. They had the lead in the second half, and so yeah, I think they could have. Whether they would have won and advanced on the road, I don't know. That'd be a tough sell with
Yeah.
with Browning at quarterback. You just see it. Although I mean, Jordan Love and CJ Stroud in their NFL debuts were unreal, but
Hmm.
you need that experienced guy and um, coaching staff. The Bengals would have that because they've got enough playoff wins. But
Yeah.
picking a win, I don't know, but competitive. I think both those games would have been more competitive than what we saw with Dolphins getting blown out by the Chiefs and the Steelers not really even. They made a
Yeah.
game of it. I'll give them credit for that, but falling behind 21-0, it was just not a good look.
Instead of talking playoffs for the Bengals, we are going to turn our eye towards the offseason and free agency. We've got a draft. We're going to do a draft for you
Yeah.
today. Jay, you came up with this idea, so I'm going to let you explain the rules that we're going to abide by for this Bengals free agent draft.
Okay, so we're gonna look at the 20 free agents the Bengals have, 2 exclusive rights free agents, and then 18 unrestricted free agents. And then Dallas and I are gonna draft them, and then we're gonna grade it. And who knows? Maybe it's the eve of training camp, maybe it's the eve of the regular season before we get our final grades in. But here's how it's gonna work. I'm gonna pick first, and then Dallas is gonna get 2, and then I'm gonna get 2, and it'll just kind of go back and forth with 2 picks each. You get a point for each person that the Bengals retain, and then you get a point for each year of the deal they sign him to. So, say I go T. Higgins with my number 1 pick, and they sign him to a 4-year, $80 million deal. That's worth 5 points, one for each year on the deal, and then the fact that they did bring him back. So, not that I'm going T with my first pick, but that's how it works. You get 1 point for the player, 1 point for the year on his contract.
And so we're discounting none of the money matters, no matter
No,
how much a player earns, their guarantees, their annual value. None of that matters for this exercise. Purely, did they come back and how many years did they sign for?
right.
That's how we're going to grade this. Okay.
And we're not counting extensions. So
We're not
Jamar
counting
Chase is
extensions.
not, and Evan McPherson are the 2 big ones this offseason. So that we're not counting those guys either.
Right. So 20 free agents, like you said. I found this pretty difficult exercise, Jay. I don't know about you. I think looking at this group, I mean, there's the big 5 free agents, obviously, that we'll talk about, but which one of those will any of those come back? Will any of those be on multi-year deals? And then you've got kind of the depth pieces that will they be back on 1-year deals or multi-season packs? So there was a lot to consider for me as I put together this list. I don't know about you. Jay, do you want to lead us off? I said elders first, so we're going to let you go first. Would you like to lead us off with your first pick in this Bengals free agency draft?
So this is tough because it's like, I know who my number 1 pick is, but I don't know if he would be your number 2 or your number 3. So do I roll the dice and bank on getting him at 4 and 5?
Right?
Or do I jump on him early? I'm going to jump on him early. I think Akeem Davis Gaither,
Oh,
linebacker, one of the depth pieces you talked about. He means so much to their special teams. He's one of their special team snaps leaders every year. They've been really lucky with Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt avoiding injuries. There's other guys on this list that they could probably bring back, but they use Akeem in specific ways, especially against the Ravens. He plays a big role when they play the Ravens, and there's other games where you see him play a bigger role on defense. So I think he's a guy that will get a 2-year, maybe a 3. I don't know how much interest there's going to be outside of there. And I do think he's got a more important role than people think he does. And I think he's one of the locks to be re-signed. That's where I really start is, some of these guys are question marks. Will they bring him back? Will they not? There's other locks on this list, but I'm going to start there with ADG.
That's an interesting pick. I'll admit I had him a little bit lower. We'll get into the other linebackers that are available. I think it's mostly depth guys and special teamers, and it's interesting. It's an interesting pick. I'm going to go on the offensive side of the ball for my first pick. I'm going to go with a guy that I have talked about all season. I'm going to go with Tanner Hudson.
Yeah.
I think there is no chance that Tanner Hudson goes anywhere else. I don't know if it'll be a multi-year deal, but I could absolutely see a 2, maybe 3-year deal with like a minimal guarantees, something like that. I mean, Tanner Hudson kind of came out of nowhere, but he led the Bengals tight ends in targets, receptions, yards. He was an integral part of this offense when Joe Burrow was under center, when Jake Browning was under center. I think the Bengals could absolutely add another piece beyond Hudson, and maybe it's one of these other tight ends that we'll get into here in a second that they could re-sign. Maybe it's an external free agent. I think they should also highly consider drafting some sort of athletic freak somewhere in the draft and trying to find a long-term option at tight end. But I think Tanner Hudson is too valuable to let go after what you saw this season, and I think he's almost a guarantee to be back next year.
Yeah, I agree. And I just don't think they value the tight end position enough to go get one of those athletic freaks early in the draft. And if it goes that way, where they start flying off the board like they did last year, and they kind of get caught holding the bag, he's a great fallback. So he was number 2 on my list. If he'd have slipped to number 4, I would have definitely grabbed him. But I figured he would be one of your top 2.
I'm going to stick at tight end for my next pick, and I'm going to go with Drew Sample.
Yeah,
I just think, this is the classic Bengals player that this coaching staff loves. I know Bengals fans have been down on him in the past, but Drew Sample played a role this season. I mean, he was basically the Bengals' third down back. He could do any number of things that this Bengals offensive staff wants. I think they like him in the locker room. They like his personality. And not only could Drew Sample come back, but I think this could be a multi-year deal for sure. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously he's not going to be making $10 million a year, but 2-3 years for a guy like Drew Sample, I don't think is out of the question. So it's not going to be at a high average annual value, but I think I could steal a couple of years here from you, Jay.
Yeah, because I think that's a good pick because, last year it was just the 1-year deal, but he was coming off the knee injury.
Yes.
And so there's some question marks, and he really was important. And I know they're almost like a tandem because it's like, if you're going to pass the ball, you need Hudson in there. If you're going to run it, you need Sample in there. And I think Sample's got a better chance of getting a multi-year deal than Hudson actually. Mm-hmm. So those are both really good picks.
All right. Your next 2 selections.
All right. Well, I mean, it's only going to be 1 year, but there's no chance in hell that Jake Browning's not back next year. So he's going to be my pick there. Okay. If we had put money in this equation, he would have been much lower because they're gonna offer him probably the league minimum. He has no recourse to once they put the offer out there, he can't negotiate with other teams. So he's locked in. I'm gonna go Cal Adamitis. It's a position that is too valuable. It's overlooked a lot, but he's done really well taking over for the legend Clark Harris. Mm-hmm. And I can't see them saying, hey, we're going to start from scratch. I mean, they've had that. Darren Simmons values the operation so much, and you're just kind of getting some cohesion with those 3. And I don't know. I mean, Brad Robbins is going to get some competition as a punter, but I still think he's going to be back as the punter next year and therefore as the holder. And I think they really will value Cal snapping to that. And we know McPherson's coming back, so they're going to keep that battery the same.
Yeah, that makes sense. He was pretty high on my list, and he's an exclusive rights free agent too. He's the other one along with Jake Browning, so he can't go anywhere else. Bengals can pay him at the league minimum. I don't see why they wouldn't have their long snapper back. All right. I'm going to go with my next pick. I'm going to make it 3 for 3 and go with another tight end. I'm going to go with Mitchell Wilcox.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know if they'll be able to sign all three of these guys, if they'll all be interested in coming back, if they want to look for more time elsewhere, if they think they can play a role. But Mitchell Wilcox is a very valuable player on special teams, as a
Mhm.
third and fourth tight end, as a blocker. I just think that the Bengals really like what they have there. And like you said, they don't value the tight end position enough to maybe use a first or second round pick. Even if he used a fourth or fifth round pick on a tight end, that means you need these kind of veteran guys who have been around, who know the offense, who can play on special teams, who can, be trusted to do the roles that they're asked to do, which may be a rookie tight end, not always able to rely on rookie tight ends. That's a hard position to develop. So I think you want a guy like Wilcox who knows what he's doing and has been here before.
Yeah.
I am going to go for my next pick. Oh, it's so tough. This is a really tough one. I'm going to go with Cody Ford. I think Cody
Ah,
Ford had a really nice season as the Bengals' top backup offensive lineman. He's clearly ahead of Max Sharping. He's clearly ahead of Jackson Carman. He came in and played left tackle for Orlando Brown at one point. I think he can basically play anywhere up front except for center, and maybe he could even play there too in a pinch. I think the Bengals really like what they have in him. I mean, they talked up Cody Ford much more than you would expect a coaching staff to talk up a sixth or seventh offensive lineman. I think Bengals are going to want to have an experienced depth guy, even if they draft some more offensive line help. I think you're going to want to have a guy who's been around, who can play multiple positions. I could see a 2-year deal for Cody Ford, so I'll take him with my pick here.
yeah. Another guy on a 1-year deal this year, but kind of proved it. Really impressed the staff early in training camp. We thought, that it was going to be between Deontay Smith and Jackson Carman as that swing tackle, and it ended up being Cody Ford. He would have been my pick had he fallen to me. That's who I had on my list next. So that is a really good pick. I don't know that they'll go 2, but 1 for sure. And just you just look at the state of the O line.
Yeah.
They need to keep these guys, and that's why I'm going to go. I'm going to go. Well, it doesn't matter because I have 2 picks. I'll go Sharping next, just to kind of follow in that theme, because he is their backup center right now. You look at what this offensive line was this year. All 17 games, same 5 starters.
They got very lucky. They
Did.
lucky.
And how? I mean, you have to figure that the law of averages is going to catch up with you, because it was like that last year too, through 15 weeks, and then they started going down. And he's just a solid veteran. He's not a guy that you're going to feel great about if he gets pressed into multiple games having to start, but he's a quality piece. Was active every game as a backup offensive lineman, can play guard, tackle, or center, and is, like I said, the primary backup for Karras.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with him there. And then I'm going to go Joe Bocci. Another one of those glue guys, a linebacker, a Darren Simmons special on special teams. And they are thin behind the top 2 at linebacker. I kind of went back and forth between him and Marcus Bailey here. But I think Bocci is a guy that would feel more comfortable putting in a situation if one of those guys were to go down. Although I was really high on Marcus Bailey coming out, and I thought he was a steal in the 7th round. It's just really never come together for him. He has been very valuable on special teams, but that's the direction. I'm going to go Sharping and then Bocci.
Yeah, I like that. I actually had Sharping a little bit lower, but I had Bocci pretty high up on my list. He would have been one of my considerations here for sure. Be interested to see what they do at the linebacker position. I mean, they've obviously got their 2 starters, but they're going to have some depth and some special team guys there. And is it the guys that Darren Simmons wants? Do they try and draft somebody? It's going to be an interesting kind of depth plan there for the Bengals. Let's see. I am going to go. I think I'll start with my first of the kind of the big 5 free agents. I'm going to go with T. Higgins.
Yeah.
I think it'll almost certainly be a 1-year franchise tag. I just don't see any other option with a Jamar Chase extension coming down the line. I don't think the Bengals are going to get into a long-term agreement with T. Higgins. I think if they were going to do that and find a kind of price point that made sense for both them and T. Higgins, it probably would have happened by now. But there's just no reason not to bring T. Higgins back at, $21 million or so for 1 year on the franchise tag. It's fully guaranteed, but it's not a long-term investment. Bengals are going for the Super Bowl next year. It is an absolute Super Bowl run type of season. You want all hands on deck. Wide receivers, top end of the wide receiver market is $30 million per year. That's what Tyreek Hill makes. Justin Jefferson's probably going to make 32, 33 on his extension. We don't know what Jamar Chase is going to make. $21 million for T. Higgins, who I think could be a wide receiver one on any number of teams. Bengals have to take that deal with a Super Bowl on their mind. So I'm going to go with T. Higgins. I'm going to stick at wide receiver for my next pick as well. I'm going to go Trenton Irwin.
Mhm.
I think he's a guy who has shown he could step up and fill in when needed. Obviously, the Bengals are going to want to get Charlie Jones and Andre Yoshivas more involved in the offense as they go into their second NFL seasons. But I just don't think you can discount the veteran experience that a guy like Trenton Irwin has, who he's not the most explosive guy. He's not the most athletic guy. He comes in and does the job the Bengals ask of him basically every time he's been called upon. I think that's pretty valuable, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's back here, probably on a 1-year deal, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's back.
He has Joe Burrow's stamp of approval. That's all you need to know right there. I mean, he's got Burrow's trust, and so yeah, that he was going to be my next pick on the list. There's great value in T. I mean, I don't think it can happen, but Joe Burrow made it certainly sound like it was a possibility the Bengals were going to sign him. I don't know what those conversations were like. It's probably the Bengals saying, yeah, we're going to try. But whether they're willing to pay the money that it would take to actually keep him, we'll see. We need to figure out the rules on this. If the Bengals tag him and then trade him, does that count? Or for you, is that a point for you? Or
that's a good question. I don't know. I will say that I think there's like a no percent chance that happens. I just don't see any way that they would tag and trade him.
Yeah.
And I'm making the Higgins pick, hoping I can get the 1 year. Maybe there's the upside of the 4 years. Maybe there's that 1% chance I could get a 4-year steal here, but I'm just trying to lock in that 1 year. I think that's the most likely route.
Yeah, you're going to win this thing if it's a 4-year for him. I mean, that would be amazing. So where do I go? I'm going to go Josh Tupou. Just another guy that they are thin at defensive tackle. He's been another glue guy. He's never going to be a guy that's going to be a starter caliber, but there's a reason he's been here since the Marvin Lewis era. Started as an undrafted guy, has just really kind of earned his spot. And I'd be surprised if he's not back on a 1-year deal just to be insurance there. They're gonna have to do something with assuming they lose DJ Reader, and maybe they get it in the draft, maybe it's in free agency, but until you know for sure on that, I think it just makes sense to lock Tupou up. There's not going to be a big market for him. They're going to get him at a reasonable price. So I'm going to go there, and then I'll go Reader. I think there's a really good chance. It sucks for him that this happened, and that you look on PFF and they've got his projected contract is astronomical, and it's just not going to happen. Nobody's going to sign him to that, not knowing where he is health wise, and you're not going to know where he is health wise until at least training camp and maybe later. And Readers, he loves it here. They love him. I could see the Bengals have kind of, I don't want to say dipped their toe, and they're more willing to make contracts incentive laden. We saw it with how they did Joe Mixon's after asking him to take a pay cut, and then throwing a bunch of incentives in there and giving him every chance to hit those incentives. So I think there's a good chance that Reader's back. Not a great chance, or I would have picked him much earlier in this draft, but we're getting down to the bottom of the barrel here with no chance in hell, guys. So I'm going to do that. Tupou and Reader.
Reader would have been one of my next picks for sure. Like the injury really stinks for him, but it makes it more likely that he'll come back to the Bengals, no question. And whether it's Tupou, whether it's Reader, this defensive tackle rotation is going to need some sort of overhaul, I think. I mean, you've got BJ Hill. You're hoping Zach Carter can ascend next year, but you got to add some sort of talent there, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a first-round pick. I don't know, but there's got to be something there. So Reader would have been one of my next picks. I'm actually going to take the next in last linebacker we've got here. I'm going to go Marcus Bailey. He's our last of the 3 kind of backup special teams linebackers on the board. I think he's got as good of a chance as Joe Baki or ADG to come back. So I will lock him in and hope that he comes back on a 1-year deal. Next pick, it's really tough. I know we've got, 3 of the big 5 left, but I'm actually going to stick with Travion Williams. I think he's been here for long enough. I don't see Joe Mixon coming back. I don't think he'll accept another pay cut. I don't just don't see him back. I think he'll want to have different opportunity with a different team. Chase Brown, maybe he'll be the lead back. Maybe there'll be a free agent addition or a draft pick. But Trevion Williams is kind of a guy who I don't want to say they trust him because I think we've seen him struggle at times, but they know who Trevion Williams is. I don't, again, we might need to talk about the rules because I don't even know if Trevion Williams will make it to the opening day roster, but I do think he will at least be re-signed on a 1-year deal. We'll see how that counts for me or not, but I think he'll be back in some capacity.
I think if he's back, he'll make the team. They still had a role for him. He does play a lot on special teams. It's another element that we're not kind of counting here. And then just even if they go out and draft another running back or sign another running back, I think he would be a third or a fourth guy. He may not be active on game days, but I think if they sign him, he would make the 53.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of in the same mold. I don't think there's a great chance of this, but in the same vein as DJ Reader, I'm going to go Tyler Boyd. I can see the market kind of cratering, and he runs it back, especially if Higgins is back. It's the keep the band together for one more year. I think it's a long shot, but we're getting down to the bottom here, and there's not a lot of better options. It's actually going to be Boyd and then AJ McCarron. I know that they'll probably bring another arm in to be a camp arm and maybe a young guy, knowing that at some point they're going to lose Jake Browning probably. But McCarron means a lot in terms of what he brings knowledge wise and what he means to that room. And we don't know what would happen if he gets a chance to play in an extended period. Things aren't good if that is the case, if he gets that chance, but he does have some value. And the other guys on this list, well, one has great value, but he also has a great salary. Two of them do. And then one has no value whatsoever. So I'm going to go AJ McCarron.
We've got 3 players left, Jay. I think you know who I'm going to leave you with at the end. I'm going to go with my first pick. I'm going to go with Chidobe Awuzie. I don't think he'll be back. I think they're 5%, 10% chance. I mean, if he comes back, it's probably not going to be as a starter. I mean, you're looking at DJ Turner and Cam Taylor-Britt as your starting outside corners next year, not discounting that the Bengals could add another draft pick there as well. Cheeto has did really good work for the Bengals. I mean, honestly, a great free agent signing in totality. I know that with the injury and this season has been a struggle, but for the money, it was one of the best signings in recent memory. But I think it's probably time for the Bengals to let him move on, and hopefully he can find an opportunity elsewhere. I do hope that for him, and I think he can still play. And with my last pick, I'll take Jonah Williams. Don't think he'll be back next year. Think he'll be priced out of the Bengals range. Although, gotta say, I do the free agent list for PFN. I had Jonah as, I believe, the first or second offensive tackle. Other free agent lists, I'm not seeing him listed at all in the top 50 for agents. I think that's a total oversight by other people doing this list. And I know Jonah Williams is not an all-pro. He's not a pro bowler. But this guy has played left tackle. He's played right tackle at a competent level. You can't find that in free agency. He's a youngish guy. He's a former first-round pick. He's going to get paid in free agency. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think it will be with the Bengals. I think they'll have to explore other options at right tackle. Jay, I've left you with one player for your final pick. I'm sorry to do it, but there's one guy left.
Yeah, I mean Irv Smith, but there's no chance he's coming back. I mean, I don't know if anybody will sign him after this year. Maybe he's still young, former first round pick, but maybe he does get a look elsewhere. But just never worked out here, and that's not one I'm counting on.
No, I don't think he'll be getting anything from that, unfortunately. That's our draft. Let's recap our picks, Jay. I don't know if you have your picks written down. I've got mine written down here. I will go through mine. So in order, here's who I drafted: Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, Mitchell Wilcox, Cody Ford, T. Higgins, Trenton Irwin, Marcus Bailey, Trevion Williams, Chidobe Awuzie, and Jonah Williams. Jay, who were your 10?
And I have Akeem Davis-Gaither, Jake Browning, Cal Adamitis, Max Sharping, Joe Bocci, Josh Tupou, DJ Reader, Tyler Boyd, AJ McCarron, and Irv Smith. We probably should have come up with some sort of tiebreaker in case this does end in a tie, but I don't know what it would be at this point. And, maybe it won't. Maybe T signs that 3 or 4 year extension and you just blow me out of the water.
Could do total contract value or something. We'll figure out a tiebreaker, but that's our draft. And now we wait. To see what happens. It's, almost exactly 2 months until free agency starts. So there's, maybe some of these deals could get done in the interim. Maybe some will have to wait till right up until the deadline. Deadlines always spur action, so maybe we'll have to wait until March to see if any of these deals get done. But lots of excitement to come up for this free agent period for the Bengals. I think one of the most critical free agent periods in recent memory for the Bengals, honestly. I mean, with this, not just the top end guys, I think, and T. Higgins right there at the top, but also a lot of depth pieces, I think, that will have to be considered in these coming months. Let's finish up by going and discussing our bets for the week. Jay, we did a couple bets. There's no Bengals games to talk about, obviously, but we did a few bets last week for these playoff games. You want to recap how we did last week, and then we'll get into our couple picks for this week.
Yeah, my Saturday special, I hit both of them. I took Kansas City -4, and I took Houston plus the 2.5. So I am on the positive side now. I'm at plus 14 for the year, which is amazing.
Bravo.
That's hard to do. You're hanging in there. You had Houston plus 2.5 as well, but you took the 10 with Pittsburgh. What did that end up? Was that 14?
What was the score there?
I marked it as a loss, but now that I'm thinking,
31-17.
Yeah, 14. Yep. So you push, so you're at minus 20. So we still have 3 weeks to go. There's time to catch up, and I'd be stunned if I stay on the positive side. It just doesn't work that way. But yeah, do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first for this week's picks?
I'll go first. I'm going to stick with Houston again. Not to win, but to cover. So they are getting 9 points in Baltimore. Just think CJ Stroud, man. I mean, how can you go against this guy right now? Him and Bobby Slovic, their offensive coordinator, who is just in his absolute bag against the Browns. And I'd be surprised if he doesn't land a head coaching job here in these next few weeks too. So I'm going to go with the Texans to at least cover the 9. And then I'm going to go to the NFC for my other pick. I'm going to go Lions to cover the 6 points against Tampa Bay. Great job by Baker Mayfield against the Eagles, and seeing that kind of offense work against that poor Eagles defense. But Detroit's defense is playing much better than the Eagles defense is right now. Aiden Hutchinson was absolutely incredible as a pass rusher in the Lions wildcard game. I don't think this Bucs line can hold up against Detroit's defensive front, and I have no issues believing that Detroit can put up plenty of points against this Buccaneers defense. So I'll go Lions -6.
Yeah, I was really kind of scared of the emotional hangover. That they put the whole city, the team. That was such an incredible scene, and to win that and get that first one off their back. But they're at home again. It's kind of like when the Bengals broke their streak against the Raiders, and they came out and played well the next week. But I don't know. I like the pick. I just was a little leery of that, and I'm really leery of Houston for the simple fact here. I should have this closer. So teams, I thought they were 9.5, but teams that are favored by that much in the divisional round they cover a lot, they win a lot. And I'm sorry, I'm slow here finding my stats. I didn't memorize them like I should have.
The reason that I think Houston can be competitive in this game is that CJ Stroud just does not turn the ball over.
Yes.
I mean, he led the league with a 1% interception rate. He threw 5 interceptions all season long. That's incredible for anyone, let alone a rookie. And Baltimore isn't a defense that has to get turnovers to succeed. I mean, they get pressures. They get, they're just a good defense in terms of stopping offenses in general without relying on turnovers. But they're not going to be able to get good field position or score pick sixes or anything like that off CJ Stroud, because he simply takes care of the ball too well. So that's part of my thinking and picking Houston to at least cover in this game.
And that offense is built for the backdoor cover. If it's a 14 or 15 point game, and they get a touchdown at the end. So it shouldn't be surprising, because teams that are favored by 9.5 or more in the playoffs are 70-16 in the Super Bowl era. Which, if you're favored by that much, you should win. But 15-1 since 2012. The lone loss, Baltimore at home to the Titans in the 2019 divisional round.
Yes.
But in terms of covering, they're 13-3 in the last 16 against the spread. So the big favorites tend to cover the number. And then for anybody that's interested, placing a little wager, these games with the big spreads, at least 9.5 since 2010, the over has hit 15 out of 19 times in those games. So
Interesting.
that's something to look at in both that game and San Francisco, Green Bay. And that's where I'm going with my
Okay.
pick. I'm going over 50.5 for San Francisco and Green Bay. I think this is going to be a points fest. I think San Francisco is going to win, but how can you not like what that Green Bay offense did against the Cowboys? I know it's going to be a tougher sledding in San Francisco, but they're not going to shut them down. They're going to get their points. I just think this is going to be a shootout and a fun game to watch. And then my other one, I'm going to go Bills -2.5. I think it's a big deal that we haven't seen Patrick Mahomes on the road in the playoffs. I think the Bills are playing better. I'm a little scared with the injury decimation that keeps happening on the defensive side of that. But the Bills are on a heater right now, and they're at home, and they've waited for a long time to get Kansas City. I mean, the only time Kansas City's played in Buffalo with Mahomes was in 2020 when there was no fans there. It was the COVID year.
Yeah.
So I think it was an incredible scene with all the snow yesterday. I cannot wait for that Sunday night game, Kansas City Buffalo. It's going to be it's the reason it's in that slot is because the Bills played Monday, and there's no way they could make them play Saturday. But in terms of viewership, this is going to be one heck of a matchup, and I can't wait for it. And I'm going to go Bills -2.5.
I can't wait for that game either. I mean, it's everything you want in an NFL playoff game. And that would have been my other pick too. I think if I would have made 3 picks, that would have been my pick. Bills are still my Super Bowl pick. Like they were my preseason Super Bowl pick, and I'm going to stick with them. I had them playing the Cowboys, so that didn't work out quite as well, but I do think the Bills, they're still my pick to win it all. Jay, if you think there's one favorite who could get upset this weekend, is there a team you think that could maybe get upset by a lower seed this week? And I don't know. I tend to want to go with a chalk in every game. Is there a team that stands out that could maybe be eliminated this week, surprisingly?
I mean, it's going to be contradictory, but I'm going to say the Bills. I mean, that's you betting against Patrick Mahomes. Doesn't sound smart in the playoffs, just what he's been, but it is on the road. It's only a 2.5 point game. It's 6 for Detroit. Those other games are up around 9 and 10. So I think Green Bay's sneaky. I think getting that win and playing to all the way to the finish to have to win and get in, and then San Francisco resting everybody in week 18 and then the bye. And I think that's a dicey spot for them, but Kyle Shanahan's going to have a great game plan. And I'm reluctant to go with rookie. He's not a rookie, but young quarterback.
De facto.
Yes. But he looks so good against Dallas. It kind of throws that out the window. But
he's a top 10 quarterback right now. Like, no question. I mean, he the arm angles, the athleticism, the pocket mobility. I mean, there are only a few guys in the NFL that I think can play like he's playing right now. And
the composure in the pocket,
composure too,
pressure, and I mean, it's not like he's got studs. I mean, he's got good receivers, but they're young too.
They're all young. They're all first or second year receivers.
I mean, however these playoffs play out, Green Bay might be a top 4, top 5 team in terms of Super Bowl odds next year. It's
amazing.
It's coming together really fast for them. So that's. I'll say San Francisco is my second most likely, but I got to go Buffalo just because it's a 2.5 point spread. It just feels like that game is almost a toss up. Even though I took it as my bet, I still think that's the most likely upset.
Yeah, in the past I would have said San Francisco only because of Kyle Shanahan's game management problems. He's just not great at like knowing when to go for 2, knowing when to go on 4th downs, knowing when to call timeouts. In the past, he's gotten much better at that, I think, watching him this year. And I don't know if he has somebody helping him with that, but that type of stuff usually comes up in the playoffs and when these games are tight. But he's gotten so much better in that I have a little more faith in him. I guess I have to kind of pick the Ravens as the most likely team to get upset since I'm going with Houston +9. I do think Baltimore will probably still win, but yeah, I think you have to give Kansas City a chance solely because of Mahomes and because they have a good defense and because Josh Allen likes to give the ball away a lot. But man, he played well on Sunday. He is just an absolute Superman who can carry a team on his back at any point. And even against a defense that's as good as the Chiefs, I think you could see another performance like that. And I don't think Josh Allen's going to win MVP because the votes had to be put in before the playoffs came in. But I think if there would have been some voting maybe this week, Josh Allen could have been right up there with Lamar Jackson.
And he didn't put the ball in danger like he
He
does
did not.
so
He did
many
not this
times. He had
past
the
week.
one that was almost a pick, but that was just that wasn't a bad decision. He just didn't put enough air under it. The one
Yeah.
that the defender like tipped at the 5-yard line.
Yep.
That I kept waiting for that. My wife was watching it with me, and once Pittsburgh got it to a 7-point game, I was like, Josh Allen hasn't committed a turnover yet.
Right.
You know it's coming at some point. This could get really interesting, and it didn't. They went right down the field and got the Shakir touchdown, and that pretty much sealed it. So
yep.
If he plays like that, if he doesn't turn the ball over, they will beat Kansas City.
Yeah, it'll be another fun weekend. I mean, these 2 weekends are some of my favorite weekends of the entire year. You get, last week all the games, and this week the kind of truly elite teams on the field. 4 games, great weekend of football. I'm excited. Jay, anything else before we sign off for this podcast episode?
No, just looking forward to the games this weekend, and hopefully my wife will let me sit on the couch and watch all 4 again. She was out of town this weekend, so I got to do what I wanted. But yeah, I'm with you. I think divisional is my favorite weekend, football wise.
Yeah.
I still love the first 2 rounds of March Madness, but this is wild card's fun, but divisional is when it's really, really, if you like dive into the X's and O's and all the intricate strategies that go into these matchups. It's so fun, and there's so much on the line, and I can't wait. I think all 4 games are going to be terrific. I don't think we're going to see, what was it? I tweeted the stat, and I don't have it here in front of me. It was like
17 or 19 or something.
Yeah. Average margin of victory in the games this weekend was the 3rd highest in the wild card round since I created a wild card round in 1990. I think we're going to see some much better games this weekend.
I would agree. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to all the action this weekend. Everyone, thanks for listening. Please give us a rate and review. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. Give us a comment. All the good stuff that you know how to do. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We will be back next week.